I packed my bags for the National Defense Academy. There was simply no turning back now. My so-called fiancée glared at me with a freezing look and warned me that once I enrolled at Edenbridge University, I should just live in the dorms and stop bothering her because her precious Julian might get pretty jealous. I did not even look up, casually replying with a simple sure. She had absolutely no idea I had already changed my college choice. Then she coldly added that we did not need to get our marriage certificate on the first day of school either. She claimed childhood promises did not really count. I paused for a quick second, then just nodded obediently. Why explain to them that I was actually heading to the National Defense Academy, thousands of miles away? I had completely given up on her. Honestly, I did not have even a tiny bit of expectation left for her. Honestly, our goals were pretty much the exact same. We wanted to get rid of each other forever. Just yesterday, I walked into the high school office for the 7th time. I told Mr. Harrison I still planned to continue my studies, but I wanted to swap my Edenbridge spot for a cryptography and decryption major at the National Defense Academy. The late autumn wind carried a bitter chill, but I stood completely straight with unusually determined eyes. He froze, then looked absolutely thrilled, telling me that I had finally seen the light. Apparently he thought I would give up my college spot to my cousin just to please Serafina. But this major is quite special. I would have to erase my identity and live incognito, asking if I had discussed this with my family. There was no need to discuss it with them because I make my own decisions. Hearing the word family stung, but relief quickly followed. Once I vanished from their lives forever, maybe nothing else could ever be stolen from me again. Simply because my uncle drowned saving me, my parents brought my cousin Julian home, claiming I owed him a life and should always yield. To pay this debt, my parents threw every good thing at Julian. Even my own fiancé ended up falling head over heels for him. Both family and romance were completely stolen from me. And now, they wanted to snatch my college admission spot too. My parents forced me to accept the ridiculous terms of Serafina, basically trading our marriage certificate just to make me give it up. Lying on my creaky balcony cot last night, I finally woke up and realized I had to smell the bitter coffee. This time, I was not giving up a single thing. Instead, I decided to cut all ties with them. I refused to be part of their toxic circus anymore. Outside, the red maple trees blazed like bright fire. Walking down the cold streets, my shadow looked pretty lonely. Around me, workers rode home on rusty bikes, laughing and smiling. This noisy, happy world felt completely foreign to a guy like me. Suddenly, a jeep blocked my path. The window rolled down, revealing a gorgeous but icy face telling me to get in. Serafina looked totally impatient, asking if I had cleared everything up with the school yet. I stayed silent for a bit. Sure, I made things crystal clear, but not by following her stupid demands. I was leaving for a place she could never track down. Before I could speak, Julian poked his head from the back seat with shopping bags, boasting that Sister Serafina bought him clothes, shoes, and even a brand new radio. She told him that when he goes to Edenbridge, he cannot let anyone look down on him. My eyes locked onto the necklace around the neck of Julian, and my face completely lost all of its color. My heart felt crushed, blood rushing painfully through my veins. That was the sacred relic of my grandmother, the exact token of love I had gifted to Serafina. Talk about a slap in the face. She actually gave the heirloom of my grandmother to another guy. She caught my furious glare and looked briefly awkward, but she quickly wiped any trace of guilt right off her face. She scoffed that Julian liked it, and it was not some priceless treasure anyway. She promised to buy me a better one after we got married. A bitter taste filled my mouth. The cheap metal did not matter. Only the love behind it mattered. But to Serafina, it was clearly about as valuable as a dusty penny on the street. It made sense. She never loved me anyway. So why would she cherish the relic of my family? At the mention of our marriage, jealousy flared in the eyes of Julian. He immediately went into his signature victim routine. Julian whined to Sister Serafina that I looked unhappy, asking if I blamed him for taking my college spot and crying that it was his fault. He cried that he should not take my things and deserved to be unloved, driving Serafina absolutely crazy with worry. Her face turned dark as a storm cloud, glaring at me like a villain. Julian has it hard enough, she snapped. You have everything. Why do you still fight him? She immediately turned to comfort Julian as if he was made of fragile glass. She promised Julian his Edenbridge spot was completely safe, then snapped, go walk home by yourself and reflect on your behavior. Apologize once you figure it out. If you do not, I will never forgive you. With her speech delivered, she slammed the gas and tore away, leaving me choking in a cloud of dirty exhaust fumes. From the back seat, Julian shot me a highly provocative smirk, his smug face practically dripping with pure satisfaction. I coughed violently. Unbelievable. I did nothing, said nothing, yet somehow I am the bad guy for absolutely everything. I stood completely frozen in place for the longest time, until a single maple leaf drifted onto my cold shoulder. My thin shirt offered absolutely zero protection against the biting wind. Back then, my parents' blatant favoritism left me with nowhere to go. Serafina was the one who promised that with her around, my world would never lack love again. What an absolute joke. Even the woman who promised a lifetime together completely pulled a 180. The sky was incredibly dark and heavy. I let out a bitter laugh. Unfair parents, a lying fiancé. I am dumping every single one of them. The second I stepped inside my home, loud laughter echoed from within. Looking up, the sunset clouds seemed to form a highly sarcastic face, mocking my lonely, pitiful silhouette on the porch. Ever since my parents brought Julian into our house, my entire existence became the definition of a third wheel. Just because his dad once saved me, I had to yield everything from childhood toys to parental love, and now, my own fiancé. I felt like a wandering ghost in my own home, standing silently right outside the locked doorway. Their happy laughter inside felt like sharp daggers, stabbing directly into my chest, blood seeping onto the floorboards beneath me, forming a massive shadow that threatened to completely drown me. I pushed the door open. The cheerful laughter died down instantly. It seemed my mere presence was a total buzzkill. You can literally feel the room drop to sub-zero. Mrs. Vance gave me a cold look and pointed at a tiny stool in the corner. On top sat a bowl of rice with just 3 pathetic green vegetables. Meanwhile, their dining table was completely loaded with fish, meat, and even premium beef. Ever since we were kids, my parents claimed my cousin was still growing and needed extra nutrition, giving him all the top-tier food while forcing me to act mature. Yield your seat, yield your food. Now, I was sleeping in a dilapidated little shed on the cold balcony, eating vegetable scraps. But my parents never bothered to do the basic math. Only 6 months older than Julian. Yet, I needed real nutrition, too. Mrs. Vance actually stood up and, in a shocking move, placed a piece of fish in my bowl, flashing a fake smile here. This is your favorite dish. Hurry up and sit down. I maintained a poker face, saying, Mom, I am highly allergic to fish. The one who loves it is my cousin. For once, my mother did not hit me with her usual impatience or yell at me for being difficult. She stared deep into my eyes, forcing a kind expression. Did you explain clearly to the school about giving your Edenbridge spot to Julian? Your grades are quite good anyway, just retake the exam next year. I remained dead silent. Mrs. Vance's face changed colors, her tone suddenly turning extremely harsh. How can you be so incredibly unwilling? You owe your cousin a life. Giving up 1 Edenbridge spot is no big deal. You need to learn to be sensible. Even though I had been through this a million times, her blatant bias still sliced right through my soul. Mr. Vance slammed his chopsticks down and, out of nowhere, slapped me hard across the face, looking at me like I was a sworn enemy. How did I raise such an ungrateful son? If you do not agree, get the hell out of my house right now. No son of mine. My head buzzed like a beehive as a bright red handprint blossomed on my hot cheek. Facing my parents' wrathful glares, I felt like my body was being sliced by 1,000 invisible blades, trembling uncontrollably. Just watch this. Julian puts on his absolute best innocent victim act to play my parents. It breaks my heart. Maybe I just do not have the destiny to study. It is not my cousin's fault. I only blame the fact that nobody loves me. They instantly rushed over to comfort him, promising they would force me to surrender the Edenbridge spot and buy him a massive mountain of gifts. Only then did Julian smile. He looked over at pale, trembling me, saying, Cousin, I never meant to steal your things. If you mind, I can just leave. Mr. Vance flew into a rage, glaring at me like a cockroach. Are you satisfied now? You have turned this house completely upside down. Hurry up and apologize to your cousin right now. I wiped a smear of blood from my lip, locking eyes with every single person in the room. These people, my supposed family, were literally standing there, plotting the fastest way to ruin my entire life. Right as the bod lunged forward to strike me again, Serafina spoke up and said I already gave up my spot. Hearing that I had sorted it out at school today, my parents' angry expressions finally eased, though they still sneered. My mother stared coldly, muttering that at least I finally had a tiny bit of common sense. Since Julian is heading off to college, you can just go get a job and earn his tuition money after all. You owe him. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me, wondering how she could say something so brutally cruel without flinching. She didn't care about my feelings, barking orders at me like I was a servant. My mother ordered me to find work right after summer, claiming I was just being lazy. But get this, they instantly started planning a massive, expensive celebration banquet just for Julian. Apparently, getting into Edenbridge was a massive family honor, so nobody cared that I was still standing right there in silence. I was basically trash, summoned only when needed, then instantly tossed back aside. Eventually, I collapsed onto my mattress, my chest aching until everything inside me went completely numb. It was suffocating. Staying in this freezing, loveless home made it impossible to breathe. Below me was a damp, moldy sheet we had owned for decades, barely even wide enough to cover my body. Julian got the massive bedroom packed with toys and treats, while I was kicked out to a tiny, rotting balcony that leaked every single time it rained. 10 long years. I just endured it all. Even during hot summers, my soul felt frozen solid. But looking up at the stars, I knew I only had one single month left here. Since they clearly did not want me around, I was ready to vanish from their lives forever. That night, I dreamed of being a happy little kid again, held gently in my parents' loving, warm embrace. My sister, Serafina, who is 2 years older than me, was pinching my cheeks and calling me cute. It felt so peaceful, like a warm bath I never wanted to leave, until Julian suddenly appeared like a terrifying nightmare. Instantly, my parents' gentle faces twisted into hideous masks of pure rage as they started screaming directly at me. She just left. I screamed for my mom, dad, and sister not to abandon me. I ran after them as fast as I could, but suddenly plummeted into a dark, endless void of pure agony. None of them even bothered to look back as they walked away, completely ignoring my desperate cries for help. They just crowded around Julian, leaving me in the dark. Suddenly, a loud blast of fireworks outside snapped me awake. I thought I was done crying, but deep down, I still craved their love. Thank goodness it was just a dream. Outside, a military jeep suddenly pulled into the courtyard. He called out, congratulating me for getting accepted into Edenbridge. This was General Sterling, Serafina's father, whose life my dad once saved, leading to our arranged childhood marriage agreement. The general was really the only person who treated me kindly. He patted my head and nodded at his daughter nearby. He smiled, saying it was great we set off fireworks to celebrate my big achievement. Serafina frowned, telling her dad these were for Julian, since Caspian decided to give up his college spot for him. Seriously, she promised Julian would study incredibly hard and make everyone proud instead. The general's face darkened instantly. Before he could start screaming at his daughter, I stepped in with a weak smile. I told him to go rest after his long trip, promising to explain everything to him another day. There was absolutely no way I could let him investigate, or he would expose my secret cryptography major. I just wanted a clean break. The general scowled, glared daggers at his daughter, and then marched off in a rage. We were totally alone now. Wearing her usual emotionless face, she ordered me not to tell her dad about delaying our marriage registration. She also demanded a perfect excuse for giving up my college spot, and I just quietly nodded my head in agreement, giving zero resistance. To help Julian get into a top school, she was literally willing to marry a man she despised. Truly a dramatic savior. She claimed Julian was simply too fragile to handle any pressure. She warned me to keep quiet about our marriage and demanded to know why I had not apologized yet. Why haven't I seen you do anything yet? Before I can even speak, she goes full interrogator. Julian is leaving for Edenbridge soon. Give him some of your clothes and food tickets as a real blessing. Seeing Serafina calculate every tiny detail for Julian's sake makes my chest feel like it is being crushed by a heavy boulder. Do you seriously think I have any tickets left? He has your love and my parents' love. Does he look like he lacks a single thing? Serafina freezes. She seems to finally remember how broke I am, and a brief, messy mix of emotions crosses her face. She tells me to relax since she promised to marry me. But wow, what a joy using marriage as a pity prize to comfort me. Sister Serafina, are you actually going to marry cousin? Serafina's face completely drops as she whips her head toward the entrance. Julian is leaning heavily right against the doorframe. His face is paper white, looking completely crushed. It cannot be. Before she can even explain, Julian dramatically starts bashing his head against the wall like some tortured soul, crying out that he does not want sister marrying cousin. He loves her too seriously. Give this guy an Oscar. Serafina completely loses it, shoving me aside to run and hold him. My parents rush out next. Seeing Julian in this tragic state, their faces turn instantly pale. The three of them scramble to get Julian into the car and speed off to the clinic. Right before leaving, Serafina shoots me a look colder than ice. She asks if I see this, claiming I provoked him on purpose, and that she never knew I was so malicious. Feeling her heavy disgust and deep hatred, my chest feels like it just took a sledgehammer. Whatever Julian wants, he just acts a bit sad and the family spins around him like he is the sun. Can you believe this? Somehow, every single mess is always my fault. Furious flashes of Serafina's face play on a constant loop in my head. I tell myself to stop crying over a woman who does not love me, but damn, it still hurts. Julian's cheap parlor tricks are pretty obvious to anyone using a single brain cell. Yet once, it was actually Serafina who hated how my family always favored him over me. During my darkest, most painful moment, She barged right into the house, dragged me out, and told the entire neighborhood that nobody was allowed to mess with me ever again. Back then, she was truly so good to me. I have no idea when it happened, but she changed. Her disgust for Julian slowly turned to pity. He became my absolute kryptonite, somehow managing to steal every single thing away from me. I just coldly watched their car speed away. This is the absolute final time I will ever cry over Serafina, and the last time I feel sad in this freezing house. From now on, I am living for myself. I will dedicate my youth to serving my country. Heading back inside, I start cleaning out my tiny balcony. Inside a battered old box are all the little treasures Serafina ever gave me, from wooden toys down to a single autumn leaf. I used to treat these gifts like sacred relics, unable to throw them out, but now, they are nothing but trash. Gathering everything up, I pile them in the yard and set them ablaze with one single match. My old love burns right along with them in the flames. Just as the pile is turning to ashes, Serafina walks in and catches me red-handed. Seeing the burning wooden puppet, her face drops, a strange surge of panic rising in her chest. Her voice actually shakes as she asks why I'm burning the gifts she gave me. Why burn them? It feels like something is slipping out of her control, leaving her completely terrified. I just stare at the burning toy, until it is nothing but black charcoal, then slowly turn to meet her gaze with an eerily calm look. Right then, she gets this sinking feeling that I am about to vanish forever. I take a deep breath. The second those gifts turn to ash, the painful obsession in my heart finally lets go too. Who my parents favored, did not care. Who Serafina loved, none of my business. I have my own path now. The gifts got moldy. I say simply so I burned them. I instinctively want to throw my cards on the table and tell her that I do not love her anymore. But remembering, I still have 20-something days to endure before I can safely disappear, I bite my tongue. Serafina lets out a huge sigh of relief, nodding. Burning them is fine. It is not like they were expensive anyway. She promises to buy me new ones once we marry. I smile inside. Oh, honey, there is no marriage, and there is no us. Reasoning it out, she figures that aside from her, I literally have zero options left to me. That tiny flash of panic must have been her imagination, because her arrogant, high and mighty attitude immediately boots right back up. She furrows her brows, looking highly displeased, demanding I stop pulling a long face all day. Julian lost his parents and has depression, so do not trigger him. You have everything anyway, there is no need to fight him. I let out a dry, sarcastic laugh and ask what exactly do I have? Love from my parents? Care for my fiancé? I do not even have decent clothes because Julian stole everything of mine. What exactly should I give up next? But Serafina hates hearing me complain, and she quickly grows impatient. Do you not have your parents and me? Julian is hurting in the hospital, so go apologize to him. I honestly thought I heard her wrong. The depression Julian has is faker than a $3 bill, but they all play along like they are blind. I reply with zero emotion that he has my parents, your loving care, and a whole squad of doctors keeping him company. Do you honestly think he needs me? Serafina completely blows her top, asking how I can have zero empathy. You are the reason his depression flared up. As his older cousin, you need to be the bigger person. Since you still do not see your mistakes, it seems I have spoiled you too much. Caspian Vance, do not say I did not give you a chance. If you do not go right now, our marriage is on hold. She drops that bomb and storms off, quite clearly trying to use our marriage as a leash. She expects me to submit like a good dog. But look at this, I do not even flinch as she drives away. Heading back inside, I plan to pack up and leave, only to realize I own absolutely nothing in this massive house. That evening, my parents return with zero good news or friendly faces. Apparently, triggering precious Julian is still my fault. Mrs. Vance marches right up to me, her face extremely stern. Caspian, you need to give up Serafina. Julian likes her too, and he is threatening suicide in the hospital. You are the older cousin, so be the bigger person. My mother has favoritism that is practically psychotic, but this level of shamelessness is just unreal. Her cold words hit me like a sudden blizzard in the middle of summer. My face goes numb. Staring straight into her eyes, my voice is hoarse as I remind her I am her biological son who always yielded to Julian. Have I not yielded enough? Any new item in the house, the meat on the table, new New Year clothes, even my own bedroom. What did I not give him? I am not even going to Edenbridge University anymore. And now I must hand over my fiancé. If he wanted my life, would you make me carve out my heart too? Mom, am I honestly even your son? My buried anger finally explodes with a question straight from my soul. Mrs. Vance responds with a sharp backhand slap to my face, her expression dripping with sheer disappointment. He is your cousin, and you made him lose his father. Do you not already have enough? Your father was right. You truly are an ungrateful wretch. This time, you will yield whether you like it or not. Otherwise, you are no longer my son." Leaving those brutal words hanging, she turns and walks away. Leaning against the door frame, the setting sun looks like a giant mocking smile, treating my life like some cosmic joke. To them, I am living the dream. Soon after, Serafina returns to the yard and cuts straight to the chase. "Caspian, Julian is in a really bad mental state right now. Our marriage registration is delayed. She is not negotiating, she is commanding. Honestly, with a heart totally full of deep disappointments, I do not even feel sad anymore. Can you blame me?" I just smile and agree. She never expected me to just agree so easily, instead of throwing a massive fit. For a brief moment, she is completely speechless and frozen. I ignore her, looking out at the parasol tree in the yard. I remember when I was 11 and Julian framed me, causing my parents to tie me up and beat me before kicking me out. Helpless, alone, and utterly devastated. I squatted under that exact parasol tree, sobbing, until Serafina walked up, reached out her hand, and smiled gently. "Come home with me," she said. Back then, she was like a beam of light in my pitch-black life. I finally had hope. Someone to lean on. And to fulfill her dream, she wanted me to get into Edenbridge. When exams resumed in 1978, I studied like a complete maniac to finally secure that spot for her. We were supposed to be together forever, but looking back at it now, it was all just smoke and mirrors. The Serafina standing in front of me now is completely different. She is actively cornering me. To guarantee Julian gets into Edenbridge, she is willing to marry someone she does not love. What an epic, selfless romance. The moment she mentioned delaying our marriage certificate, my heart officially flatlined. I have absolutely zero expectations left. She says to delay, meaning she will break her promise later. He would lose his college shot, and she would never marry him. Simple math. Thank God he kept his university spot. Just 20 days left. And then, he would escape this toxic house, heading to the academy and cutting ties forever. She tells him, "Caspian, do not overthink this. Since I promised you, I will keep my word." Julian is just unstable, she says, and she does not want to trigger him. But Caspian's absolute calmness throws her into a complete panic, forcing her to make excuses. Caspian looks away from the tree and suddenly asks her if she still remembers what she promised him under that parasol tree when he was 11. Serafina's face shifts, a fleeting shadow of guilt crossing her eyes as if triggered by some distant memory. But before she can say anything, her orderly runs up looking absolutely frantic. He reports the hospital just called. Julian is hurting himself again. Serafina scowls, instantly erasing Caspian from her mind as she bolts toward the car. Watching the jeep speed away, he just turns back to his room. Up on that balcony, it was not just burnt gifts turning to ash. Other than some worn-out thin clothes, it felt like the only thing his parents ever actually gave him was his physical body. They used to provide for him, sure, but they shifted everything over to Julian. Serafina disappeared to the hospital for a full week. All week, his parents and she practically lived at the clinic to spoil Julian. Meanwhile, Caspian soaked in the glorious peace. He did not have to see Julian's annoying face, nor did he have to deal with his biased parents. Caspian tracks down General Sterling, asking him to help him train physically so he can prep for the National Defense Academy early. Since his focus would be cryptography, he knew he would be heading into some seriously dangerous situations down the line. General Sterling did not ask questions. He just thought Caspian was driven, so he went all out training him. Another week flies by. Just look at him go sweating buckets in the yard, but mentally, he is feeling absolutely phenomenal. He actually shaved his head into a clean buzz cut. Serafina always preferred guys with an artsy vibe, so he kept that style for years. Now, he is finally living entirely for himself. Getting rid of that hair makes Caspian look like a brand new person. General Sterling is seriously impressed, telling him he finally looks like a real soldier. The general does not know exactly why Caspian is training, but he suspects something and chooses not to pry into young people's drama. Still, his friend's blatant favoritism toward that nephew is getting completely absurd. Since he is often out on dangerous missions, he cannot step in, but he silently vows to back Caspian up if needed. But of course, Caspian's quiet life is completely shattered when Julian suddenly returns. He is holding a horse stance in the yard when he looks up to see his parents and Serafina bringing Julian through the gate, laughing and talking. Julian is practically stuck to Serafina, acting incredibly close, while his parents just play blind and look absolutely thrilled about it. Serafina does not push him away either, not until she notices Caspian's intense stare and quickly takes a step back. Julian immediately whines, asking if she is disgusted by him. Serafina looks incredibly awkward and has no choice but to let him lean on her again. Walking inside, Julian shoots Caspian a look of pure mockery. Caspian keeps an absolute poker face, acting like these clowns do not even exist, and focus entirely back on his tough workout. Another hour slips by before he finally finishes up, exhaling deeply as a rare cool breeze sweeps across the yard. He closes his eyes, trying to enjoy the tiny bit of comfort this awful house actually has to offer. National Defense Academy. Suddenly, a shaky voice speaks up from right behind him. He opens his eyes and finds Serafina holding a magazine, a sudden flash of panic visible in her eyes. After taking Julian up to his room, she had accidentally spotted a Defense Academy magazine lying right on his balcony bed. A huge wave of panic hit her, sending her sprinting downstairs to demand why he is looking at information about the Defense Academy. Facing her intense questioning, he stays completely calm, never rushing to explain himself. He simply grabs a towel to wipe his face, making her yell at him to say something as she grabs his wrist, shaking like she is losing her world. He slowly peels off her hand, the exact hand he once desperately wanted to hold. His heart feels totally flat, with no emotion. He just smiles, saying he is only flipping through it, as she stares into his eyes. Since he does not look like he is lying, and she proudly believes he would never deceive her, she lets out a massive sigh of relief. She nods, saying there is really nothing in there to look at. She tells him his physical state is not suited for the academy, so he should just study hard and retake his exams next year. Since your grades are quite good, you actually have a shot, she said. I just shrugged, asking if she honestly believed that. I told her my parents ordered me to work after summer to pay for my cousin's tuition. Hearing I was leaving soon, Serafina paled. She hesitated. Feeling a wave of guilt for how she'd treated me lately, she finally softened her voice. Don't worry, she insisted. I won't let you work in some factory. There's no need to stress about money. She claimed she'd already saved up enough to cover my studies for the next few years. Internally, I just laughed at myself. It was almost funny how she pampered Julian in every single way, forcing me to hand over my university spot, only to toss me some tuition cash like a bone to a stray dog. I had to admit, that happy little family really had it made. The panic in her eyes was pretty obvious. But it wasn't love. It was just guilt. Pure guilt. Honestly, we all know the moment Julian throws another fit, my trash parents will drag me to some sweatshop, while Serafina just watches silently. Thank God I didn't care anymore. Seeing my complete silence, Serafina just assumed I was acting jealous. She reached out to pat my head, only to finally notice my newly buzzed hair. I'd completely destroyed the artsy boy look she loved so much. Even with me standing right there, she suddenly felt like I was fading into thin air. Losing control was driving her insane. Caspian, I will marry you, she begged. It's just a matter of time. It's only a delay, she insisted with absolute, unwavering certainty. In the past, I would have been crying tears of joy. But now? I just gave a quiet, soft, oh. My eerily detached reaction drove her even deeper into paranoia. Up on the second-floor balcony, Julian was watching us closely, his eyes practically shooting toxic green lasers of pure hatred. I went to bed incredibly early that night. Besides avoiding my parents fawning over Julian, my body was genuinely exhausted from training. Early the next morning, I slipped out of the house and headed straight to my school. Inside the teacher's office, I met a heroic-looking man in a sharp military uniform. He radiated a hardcore, resolute aura that commanded instant respect. He introduced himself as an instructor from the National Defense Academy's cryptography major. Besides running a quick errand in town, his main mission was actually to pick me up. Since the cryptography major was basically a black ops program, it bypassed normal enrollment entirely. There were no official acceptance letters. Instead, the academy sent an escort to extract me directly, whisking me away to an undisclosed location for intense training. Once we finished the paperwork, the instructor told me he'd return in exactly 1 week to pick me up for good. Walking back, I pictured the instructor looking so badass in his uniform, and my heart soared. If I worked hard and served my country, I'd become just like him. My current home felt like a freezing void without a shred of love, but a fresh hope was blooming deep inside me. I honestly couldn't wait for the day I'd finally leave for the military academy. By the time I reached our courtyard, it was getting pretty late. My parents were out. I walked into my room and found Julian sitting on my bed, staring at me with a smug, condescending smirk. Cousin, it seems sister likes me more, Julian sneered, his voice dripping with pure mockery. See that? As long as I want it, everything of yours is mine. So, why stay here? Why don't you just go die? But you see, my path was already set, so his pathetic little insults didn't bother me one bit. He fully expected me to completely lose my mind, throw a wild tantrum, and beg on my knees while he laughed like some cartoon villain. But my calm was like punching a cloud. Nothing. His face instantly turned incredibly ugly. He absolutely despised this feeling. Recalling how Serafina promised to marry me down in the courtyard, his jealousy officially hit critical mass. Even if he resorted to slicing his own wrists, Serafina was only putting off the wedding, not canceling it. He tried baiting me again, but my complete indifference pushed him right over the edge. A terrifying flash of pure madness crossed his eyes. Snatching my arm tightly, his voice dropped to a sinister, quiet whisper. "Tell me, if you push me off this balcony, who will they believe?" My expression shattered. Just as I desperately tried to wrench my arm free, Julian brutally kicked me straight off the second-floor balcony. "Help! Don't kill me!" Julian shrieked at the top of his lungs. Then, he violently bashed his own head against the wall to draw blood before sprinting down the stairs. He threw himself onto the pavement right beside me. I just plummeted from the second story, my entire body violently crashing onto the floor. The agony was overwhelming. I couldn't even breathe. Julian's frantic shrieking immediately brought my parents and Serafina running. Spotting both of us sprawled on the ground, my parents didn't bother asking a single question. Dad marched right over and kicked me brutally in the stomach, roaring, "How could you do this to Julian?" I stared up blankly at their furious, rabid faces. Every single word of self-defense instantly choked in my throat. I just closed my eyes. It felt like a machete had just pierced Caspian's heart when his dad roared he never knew his own son was this venomous. "You are worse than a terrorist," his dad spat, declaring he had no son like Caspian anymore. Mr. Vance stared with bloodshot eyes before kicking Caspian twice in the ribs, while Mrs. Vance cradled Julian, sobbing hysterically over his fake injuries. His weeping mother hysterically apologized to Julian for stepping away and somehow causing this absolute, horrific disaster. She begged the boy to hang in there, rushing him toward the hospital while his bloody face made him look like a murder victim. But in reality, he only had tiny surface scratches. Still, Julian wailed in fake agony to manipulate everyone into a panic, flashing Caspian a highly vicious, triumphant smirk when the others turned away. Meanwhile, Caspian had literally plummeted from the second floor, leaving him 10 times more injured than his cousin. He was too broken to speak, and those brutal kicks to his ribs made him curl up on the floor. But here is the real kicker: his own flesh and blood did not believe a single word he said. Trying to explain was totally useless because they trusted Julian with absolute, blind devotion. It took Caspian several agonizing minutes just to drag himself upright, his face pale and his body shivering violently. He looked at his fiancée Serafina, but her face showed only deep disappointment, while Julian put on a pathetic crying show. Julian sobbed out an apology, claiming he shouldn't have begged Serafina to stay with him when he knew Caspian hated him. He even gasped that if his death made Caspian happy, he should just take his life instead of breaking everyone else's hearts. Caspian glared coldly at the Oscar-level acting before meeting his parents' murderous stares, his entire world turning pitch black with despair. He was totally used to the profound loneliness anyway, having already given up on his parents and Serafina long ago. He did not want these toxic relatives anymore. But why did Julian keep framing him over and over again? Suddenly, Serafina delivered a blistering slap to Caspian's face, her beautiful features twisted in absolute, icy fury. She screamed that they were already getting married, demanding to know why he tried to murder Julian when he was already suffering. As she accused him of trying to drive Julian to his grave, a burning red handprint bloomed on Caspian's bleeding cheek. He stared back, completely dead inside, realizing she believed the liar without requiring a single shred of actual evidence. In their eyes, he was just a ruthless monster. Caspian originally wanted to defend himself, hoping she might have a tiny sliver of doubt, but that was clearly useless now. Shaking her head in disgust, she asked how she could ever feel safe marrying someone so incredibly manipulative and cold. Calling him a profound disappointment, the three of them dragged Julian off to the clinic without sparing Caspian another glance. Julian looked back over his shoulder, flashing him a sinister smile that looked straight like a demon crawling out of hell. The moment their car vanished, Caspian's endurance hit zero, causing him to cough up blood and collapse on the ground. He woke up in the dead of night, his eyes ice cold, and his broken body entirely numb. He slowly crawled his way back inside, lying on his bed for hours to gather just enough energy to painfully tend to his wounds. The freezing night air outside was nothing compared to the absolute, icy void inside his chest. Their cruel actions felt like a rusty butter knife, slowly sawing a massive, painful hole right through his heart. What little mental strength he had left completely shattered, leaving him like a stray dog licking his wounds in the dark. His tears had run dry and his emotions were paralyzed, leaving behind nothing but a completely soulless husk. Trust me on this, Caspian wanted nothing more than to skip time and escape this horrible house forever. This merciless, cold-blooded family felt like a giant beast ready to swallow him whole at any given moment. Staring blankly at the ceiling, he terribly missed his late grandmother, his only source of warmth. She was the only person who ever truly loved him, before he finally drifted off only to be splashed awake. Freezing water violently jolted him awake as a massive, merciless force yanked his battered body off the bed and aggressively dragged him straight into the living room. His toxic parents and Serafina had just returned with Julian. Despite Julian having only minor scratches, they treated Caspian like a monster, his dad kicking him hard with a venomous look. He barked at Caspian to get down and apologize, threatening to disown him forever if Julian did not forgive him. Standing in this freezing home surrounded by soulless monsters, Caspian's heavily battered heart shattered into absolute dust all over again. Looking across the room, he saw nothing but disgust and deep-seated hatred on his parents' faces. Serafina looked completely disappointed, while Julian hid a smug little smirk. My own flesh and blood, the people supposed to protect me, kept tearing me apart. It was colder than any enemy could ever be. And obviously, Julian was the one who set me up. Still, they were forcing me to my knees to beg for forgiveness. In the past, I would have swallowed my pride just to beg for their love. But not today. I hated my own life. Absolutely loathed it. Why was I even born into this sick, twisted excuse of a family? When I refused to bow down, my father's face twisted with rage. He kicked me hard right in the ribs, screaming, "Do you really think you did nothing wrong?" I crashed face first into the dirt, coughing up fresh blood. Watching this, Serafina actually flinched. She nearly moved to help, but stopped herself. In her mind, I deserved this brutal lesson. So she just held my father back, shaking her head. The old man finally stepped back. For a split second, I actually thought she was going to stand up for me. But what she said next made me want to laugh like a maniac. She just stared down at me with cold, lifeless eyes. She told me I was completely unworthy to marry her in this pathetic state. If Julian had not been lucky, he could have died. Delayed indefinitely, that was my punishment. And to make amends, she was going to have a wedding ceremony with Julian first. I just stared in absolute shock. Seriously, what kind of twisted logic was that? Seeing my sarcastic smirk, she got defensive and visibly annoyed, probably feeling a tiny bit of guilt. She snapped, "It is not real. I only want to compensate him." My parents and my fiancé instantly shielded Julian, fully expecting me to go crazy and attack them. But look at this, I did not throw a fit at all. I just gave them a huge, bright smile. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, I grinned and said congratulations to my cousin and his new bride. Are we finally done here? If there is nothing else, I am going to sleep. Dragging my bruised body, I slowly crawled back to my room. I could not look at them. Not anymore. Playing the victim again, Julian whined, "Cousin, you will come to our wedding, right? Even as a formality, it would make me so happy." He asked for my blessing. My father just snorted, yelling, "Do not worry. Even if he refuses, I will tie him up and drag him there myself. Does he think he can commit crimes and just walk away?" Then, my mother shrieked at my retreating back. "If you do not show up, get the hell out of this family forever." And watch this, because I did not throw my usual jealous fit, she actually starts losing her mind. She was not actually marrying Julian. It was just a show. In her mind, I was just consumed by jealousy and needed a harsh wake-up call. In her mind, this punishment would fix me, and after the fake wedding, we would sit down and talk. But hearing me call her my cousin's wife, along with my completely unbothered smile, stabbed deep into her heart like a needle. She was confused. After that, none of them gave me a single thought. Nobody cared if I bled out from falling off the second floor. Nobody cared if I packed up and left. In their delusional minds, I was hopelessly addicted to this family and obsessed with Serafina. They thought I had absolutely nowhere else to go. For the next 3 days, I did not make a single sound. I just stayed locked away, nursing my wounds. Meanwhile, my parents and Serafina happily prepared for the big day. The venue was the prestigious state-run Grand Hotel. Back in this era, booking a place like that was the ultimate luxury flex. But just to make precious Julian happy, my parents spent every last cent of their savings. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I packed my bags early that morning, waiting for the academy instructor to come pick me up. My family and Julian had already rushed to the hotel to welcome everyone. Since Serafina was in the military, she wore her formal uniform instead of a gown. She walked right up to me and said, "Caspian, come with me soon. Julian and I are just going through the motions. We are not registering the marriage, so do not worry, I will still marry you." She sounded so incredibly sincere. It reminded me of when I was 11, kicked out of the house and crying under a tree, when she promised to never leave. But look at her now, she was completely unrecognizable. I kept my face totally blank, showing absolutely no emotion. I just gave a soft nod. Serafina let out a massive sigh of relief, having been terrified that I would crash the wedding. Seeing how quiet I was, she figured I had finally learned my place and would be her obedient little boy from now on. She insisted on dragging me along to the hotel. But she did not see that usual desperate love on my face, which made her start to panic inside. I just kept giving her flat, lifeless answers, treating my beloved fiancée like she was nothing more than a complete stranger on the street. Right as she was about to physically force me into her car, her assistant rushed over, shouting that the hotel was already waiting for her. She finally backed away, warning me that if I did not show up, our entire marriage was officially over. Watching her elegant silhouette sprint off, my face remained completely numb. I grabbed my worn duffel bag and walked out of that toxic courtyard. Just seconds after Serafina's ride disappeared, a military jeep from the Defense Academy pulled up to the gate. The officer asked if I needed to say a proper goodbye to my family. I turned back toward that miserable courtyard. 15 years of absolute hell. Never again. I refused to set foot inside that toxic place. Between my toxic parents and cheating fiancé, there was absolutely nothing left. No need, I replied, jumping quickly into the jeep. Once I checked into the academy to major in secret cryptography, my entire identity would be erased. I would live as a total ghost. From this day forward, I refused to be my parents' son, and I absolutely refused to be Serafina's husband. I was going to live purely for myself now. Meanwhile, the military jeep rolled right past the massive Grand Hotel downtown. Through the dusty glass, I could see my family standing at the front entrance welcoming guests. My parents and Julian looked completely thrilled. Serafina looked quite anxious, her eyes constantly searching the crowd with a clear hint of expectation. Seriously, look at those four. What a lovely, picture-perfect, matching family. The vehicle slowly picked up speed, leaving the grand entrance behind until they vanished entirely from view. I was finally stepping into my actual life. Back at the hotel entrance, Serafina suddenly felt a strange chill run down her spine. She looked up quickly, but our jeep was already long gone. No explanation. Just a wave of sudden, inexplicable panic gripping her chest. Meanwhile, my parents were smiling ear to ear, loudly boasting to the crowd about their incredible double blessing. Not only did Julian get into a prestigious academy, but he was marrying the prettiest girl around. The whole thing made Serafina deeply uncomfortable. Deep down, she knew the university admission, and this wedding both rightfully belonged to Caspian. She only agreed to this fake setup to help with Julian's medical recovery, but hearing them brag like this, they made it sound like Julian earned everything. He stood right by her side, looking around with a completely pathetic, sad boy expression. He whimpered, asking why his cousin was not there yet, and wondering if Caspian was still deeply angry with him. Julian loudly wondered if Caspian hated seeing him happy, saying he gladly would have begged on his knees for forgiveness. Ah, yes. Julian is firing up the victim play again. My father's face darkened as he growled about his ungrateful, useless son. He spat out that he regretted ever raising a complete disappointment like me, claiming I was not worth a fraction of Julian. My mother quickly agreed, calling me incredibly immature for skipping the big day and claiming I always bullied poor, forgiving Julian. She even lied that I tried to kill him a few days ago, claiming I am just throwing a childish tantrum. The toxic duo stood fully united, making plans to beat me senseless the very second they got back home. Determined to keep pouring gasoline on the fire, Julian lowered his head with a deeply fake, miserable sigh. He muttered that maybe I was just too in love with Serafina, claiming he never meant to steal her away from me, offering to cancel the whole wedding if his cousin was truly that furious with him. It worked. This blatant manipulation instantly pushed my toxic parents over the absolute edge. Hearing my family curse my name while imagining my ruined, heartbroken face left Julian feeling completely thrilled inside. Meanwhile, Serafina kept pacing around, staring down the road and growing increasingly anxious when I did not appear. She had only agreed to this dramatic show to satisfy Julian, not to actually go through with marrying him. At first, she thought I was just acting childish, expecting me to understand since a sick relative was involved. But she could not stop thinking about my cold, lifeless expression. Realizing I was truly gone, she knew she had to act. She rushed to the exit, but Julian quickly stepped in to block her. He asked if she was leaving. Big mistake. Serafina glared back with an icy, terrifying stare. Julian instantly flinched, dropping his pathetic act entirely. He had almost never seen her look this genuinely dangerous before. An incredibly dark, sinking feeling washed over Serafina. A voice screamed inside her mind that she had to find me. Shoving Julian aside, she completely ignored his whining and stormed out the front doors of the hotel. Speeding back, she realized she had messed up. She needed to tell me this entire wedding was just a stupid fake performance. Racing back to my old place, she sprinted through the gate and headed straight up toward my balcony window. She ripped the curtains open. "Stop throwing a childish tantrum," she yelled. "Everyone is waiting." That tiny, damp balcony was spotless. Even my old folding cot was tossed aside. That single tiny study desk I used was sitting dead center, holding a final, brutal note saying I did not want this family anymore. "Serafina, let us never meet again." Those cold, short lines slammed straight into her heart like a massive wrecking ball. Fighting the terror rising in her chest, Serafina tried to convince herself that Caspian was definitely just joking. She genuinely believed I had absolutely nowhere to go and was hopelessly clingy toward her and my parents. She assumed she knew me inside out, believing I would endure any abuse just to beg for my parents' affection. But the cold, harsh reality staring her in the face made her panic, sending her frantically scrambling to search the entire courtyard. Slowly, a horrific truth began to sink in. Every single trace of my existence was gone. The crabapple flowers I planted for her when I was 15 were dug up. The red safety ribbon I tied to her swing at 17 vanished without a single trace. Serafina sprinted straight to the parasol tree outside. She remembered I loved sitting here, burying my deepest secrets in the dirt. My desperate longing for my parents' love and my quiet crush on her were both buried in a jar under the roots. But seeing the empty spot, she froze like she'd been struck by lightning. The ground was freshly dug, the jar was smashed to pieces, and all those precious secrets were reduced to a pile of gray ash. Right then and there, the brutal truth finally clicked. I was actually gone. Serafina collapsed under the tree, staring blankly at the pile of ash. Honestly, my departure was heavily foreshadowed, but did anyone even care? An unloved child walking away forever, burning every single gift she had ever given him, destroying every sweet memory, leaving without taking a single leaf. She only agreed to fake marrying Julian to make her parents happy. She never explicitly said she was abandoning me, so why did I run? Even now, her prideful brain could not understand. She only felt the sweltering summer air suffocating her, crushing her chest as a gust of hot wind blew by, scattering the dry leaves. Looking up blankly, she could almost see that crying, abandoned little boy squatting right there under the branches. Back then, she had reached out with a warm smile, promising I would never be alone. That night under the moonlight, my eyes shone like stars. But when exactly did I turn into a numb, soulless ghost? Maybe it was the moment she suggested trading our marriage certificate for my Edenbridge quota. She suddenly remembered my face falling in sheer shock. Honestly, she knew about my crush for years, but afraid of rumors, she stayed silent. That was until her parents, Mr. and Mistress Vance, begged her to convince me to give my spot to Julian, fully knowing how important Edenbridge was to me. But using our marriage as a convenient bargaining chip, she had actually convinced herself to suggest the trade. She never expected me to agree instantly, without a second thought. She figured that with my top grades, I could just retake the exam next year, quiet the rumors, and live happily ever after. But I had chosen to drop absolutely everything and walk away instead. She desperately thought that he could not have gone far. Realizing I had absolutely nowhere else to go, she snapped out of her daze and scrambled to her feet. She used every single connection she had, locking down all local transit stations, completely determined to drag me back home. But after half a day of mobilizing the entire military compound's network, there was still zero trace of me. I had simply vanished. That massive search eventually alerted General Sterling. Abusing military power for personal family matters was a serious offense back then, so he rushed straight back home. Seeing his daughter sitting defeated at the door, the scolding died in his throat, turning into a heavy sigh. He knew exactly what had happened. He quickly ordered the search party to stand down to save her from court-martial, before dropping a massive, shocking bombshell. Caspian already left for college. Hearing that, Serafina's head snapped up. Her face twisted in complete disbelief. But those Edenbridge acceptance letters were not supposed to arrive for another 2 weeks. General Sterling let out a cold laugh, asking who told her he was going to Edenbridge. He enrolled in the National Defense Academy instead. Serafina felt like she was struck by a sudden thunderbolt. Seeing his daughter look so defeated and remembering how horribly I was treated for years, the general felt a massive surge of pure anger. He barked out, "What exactly is she crying about? She did not know how to cherish him when he was right there. Now that he is gone, who is she putting on this tragic show for? Did they honestly think they had not chased him away?" The general's heavy words completely paralyzed her. She opened her mouth to argue, but could not force a single sound out. Countless painful memories flooded her mind, like the completely ridiculous favoritism my parents always showed to Julian. She knew she was supposed to be my guiding light through that living hell. But when I was being tortured, what did she actually do? Rather than standing firmly by my side like before, she did the unthinkable and actively joined my tormentors. It hits her 3 days ago, when Julian claimed I pushed him. I looked at her with those same desperate, hopeful eyes, begging for just an ounce of grace. Instead, she didn't hesitate for a single second to side with Julian, rewarding my desperate hope with a brutal slap. That blow shattered every last expectation I had left. General Sterling could see his daughter was too shell-shocked to process anything else, and he wasn't about to waste his breath. Considering how you and the Vances treated Caspian, he should have fled ages ago. Caspian will only ever find real peace by getting as far. The general had offered to help him a long time ago, but the boy was too stubborn, holding on to hope for his parents until it ruined him. If he were in Caspian's shoes, he would have gotten the hell out of there a long time ago. After dropping that brutal truth bomb, the general spun on his heel and marched out. He didn't have time to babysit his daughter's disastrous romantic blunders. Serafina stood completely frozen in the living room, replaying my cold reactions from the past few weeks. Maybe the exact second she suggested that trade, my heart had completely died. Then she remembered that freezing night when I asked her, in a deadly serious voice, if she still remembered her promise. She collapsed onto the cold floor, clutching her head in pure, agonizing regret as hurried footsteps suddenly echoed right outside. Mrs. Vance burst straight into the house, looking utterly panicked. She cried out that Julian thought Serafina abandoned him and was throwing a massive fit. Serafina just listened, sickened by this mother's obsessive concern for her favorite. Look at her face here, she snaps her head up in pure, intense disgust. She demands to know why he's throwing a fit for her when their eyes are always glued exclusively to Julian, asking if she even knows where her actual biological son went, leaving Mrs. Vance completely bewildered before flaring up with annoyance. What absolute nonsense. Of course I care. Caspian is my biological flesh and blood. Serafina stares intensely at the woman, desperately searching her eyes for even a single microscopic atom of real motherly concern. Shockingly, there was absolutely zero warmth. Mrs. Vance only ever showed me impatience, and a wave of deep disappointment crashed over Serafina. Turning to the window, she says dead flatly that Caspian went to university, permanently. Mrs. Vance's face twists into an ugly, furious grimace as she grabs Serafina's arm, her eyes flashing with pure rage. What university? Didn't he already agree to give up his Edenbridge spot for beloved Julian? Acceptance letters won't even arrive for another half-month, showing he's just a lying delinquent who deserves a severe beating the second he returns. Hearing her promise to punish him, Serafina's heart quakes with absolute, pure disgust. She feels a profound, aching pity for me. I was gone forever, and yet my own mother was still standing there complaining. Losing all patience, she violently tears away and snaps that Caspian enrolled in the National Defense Academy, not Edenbridge. Instantly, Mrs. Vance's face turns ugly as she unleashes a storm of horrific curses. She screams about what right he has to go there and what they're supposed to do about Julian since they already announced it. They have a massive university banquet to host, and she accuses Caspian of playing a sick game just because he can't stand to see Julian succeed. No, you have to drag him back here immediately. He has to give up that Edenbridge spot for Julian. Yanking aggressively at Serafina's arm, she tries to pull her out the door like I had committed some unspeakable treason. Serafina is about to shove her away again, but Mrs. Vance's very next frantic words freeze her dead in her tracks. Julian slit his wrists. He lost an insane amount of blood, and though Serafina hesitates, she ultimately feels forced to follow her to the hospital. Since her sudden wedding escape triggered Julian's mental breakdown, she still feels partially responsible for this. During the ride, Serafina makes up her mind that the moment Julian stabilizes, she is laying all her cards on the table. She is completely done dealing with his endless, manipulative drama. From here on out, her sole mission in life is to find me and explain the truth, just as they reach the hospital room door. But just as they reach out to push the room door open, they hear Julian singing, and honestly, it sounds nothing like a depressive breakdown. Wait, do you hear that? The guy's in a fantastic mood, and Serafina instantly knows something is wildly off. Suddenly, my warning flashes in her mind that his depression is completely faked, that he isn't sick and only wants to steal my life. Back then, she brushed it off, assuming I was just being a jealous liar. But with my sudden disappearance in deep despair, she grew pretty suspicious. She stopped Mrs. Vance, pressing a finger to her lips, signaling her to remain silent, and hear what Julian was saying inside. Mr. Vance was off getting hot water, leaving Julian completely alone. Inside, he showed absolutely no signs of being a depressed, suicidal patient. He was just lounging on the hospital bed, legs crossed like a boss. Julian laughed with the sheer arrogance of a cartoon villain, muttering that the little bastard must be rolling in his grave. His parents are mine now. His college spot? Mine. And soon, even his fiancée belongs to me. Sure, it is a fake marriage for now, but if I just throw a small tantrum, those gullible idiots will force her to consummate it. Once I seal the deal, she can never back out. I am an absolute, undisputed genius. Julian kept his voice low, but that hospital hallway was dead silent, which meant the two women outside heard every single dirty word. Can you even imagine the shock on Mrs. Vance's face? She honestly thought her ears were playing tricks. Serafina clenched her fists until her knuckles turned bone white, absolute rage blazing in her eyes. What on earth did she just hear? Julian was faking his illness this entire time, literally admitting to stealing everything. First the parents, then the college spot, and now her. A cold shiver ran through Serafina. She never imagined in her absolute worst nightmares that someone could be this toxic. Calling Caspian a bastard? Calling his parents complete idiots? Was this truly the sweet, fragile little Julian they had always pampered? Serafina looked over at Mrs. Vance, feeling a massive wave of tragic irony. For this total sociopath, this mother had literally kicked her own biological son out of the house. Talk about insane irony. Remembering everything Caspian suffered, Serafina felt a desperate urge to slap herself across the face. They were wrong, spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. They were played like a cheap fiddle, and Julian's line about securing the goods sent a sickening shiver down her spine. Unable to hold back her explosive rage for another second, Serafina kicked the door wide open. The smug, arrogant grin on Julian's face did not even have time to fade before his entire body froze completely. Absolute terror filled his eyes as he stammered, asking how long they had been standing out there. Before Serafina could even react, Mrs. Vance lunged forward and grabbed his collar, her voice shaking with pure rage. She screamed, demanding to know why he lied. Julian, scared out of his mind, instantly dropped to his knees, his brain scrambling to find a loophole. Mrs. Vance's face went completely pale. She could not believe such poison came from his mouth. She had pampered him like her own, giving him absolutely everything he ever wanted. Because of him, she completely abandoned her real son, Caspian. And how did Julian pay her back? By calling Caspian a bastard and calling her an idiot. As she raised her hand to strike, Julian wailed, collapsing into a dramatic heap. He sobbed, begging Auntie for forgiveness, claiming those words were just psychiatric hallucinations. He lied that he dreamt his cousin framed him, and they all abandoned him, so he was just talking crazy. Then, to make it look real, Julian started violently smashing his head against the floorboards. Seeing blood, Mrs. Vance's face softened a bit. Her motherly instincts kicked in, and she reached out to help him, making Julian rejoice. But then, Serafina's freezing voice cut right through the air. She warned that she would personally investigate every single thing he had ever done to Caspian. Serafina's face was completely deadpan. My sudden departure was like cold water throwing her right back to reality. Being the youngest regiment commander in her entire division, her investigative skills were incredibly sharp. Julian's face turned completely white. He frantically tried to explain, but Serafina simply spun around and walked out, carrying an absolute volcano of silent rage. If Julian was indeed a massive fraud, then everything from their past was a lie, she barely dared to imagine. If this whole thing was just a show directed by Julian, how much horrible injustice had I been forced to endure? Even thinking about it was terrifying. But wait till you see what happened when she used General Sterling's network. It was an absolute horror show. Reading through his long list of evil acts, Serafina almost lost her mind with fury. Since she stopped protecting him, tons of people were finally willing to step forward and speak the truth. Best of all, she discovered a hidden journal in his room. It was literally his own secret villain confession log. February 9th. My birthday. Dad gave me a pair of sneakers. They are just so ugly. Why was I born into this pathetic, dirt-poor family? I wish Dad would just die already. March 12th, he finally died saving Caspian. But why not save Serafina instead? Then I could have used that life-saving debt to join the Sterling family. Oh well, the Vance family is actually a pretty decent backup. I am fostering with them now anyway. My first task: drive Caspian straight to his grave. With him around, I can never have it all. Luckily, Auntie totally favors me. Every single frame-up works like a charm. I am simply too smart. Serafina frantically tore through the diary pages until hitting a recent entry. Her gorgeous face twisted with pure, absolute rage. To push Caspian over the edge, I actually threw him off the balcony. I never expected that cockroach to survive uncrippled, but it does not matter. Thanks to that, I get to marry Serafina. She gripped the notebook so hard her knuckles turned stark white. A roaring fire of pure wrath burned in her chest. She wanted to destroy Julian. And get this, every single word I said was true. She remembered when I was 11 and she couldn't stand my parents' blatant, ugly bias. Taking me into her home, she promised to protect me for a lifetime, but somewhere down the line, she completely lost her way. Just how many lonely nights did I spend falsely accused, shivering on a broken cot and quietly licking my deep wounds? When I was shoved off that roof, Serafina had the perfect chance to step up and help prove my innocence. Instead, without asking a single question, she slapped me hard across the face. I walked away in total despair, utterly broken. Serafina slammed that diary right into my parents' shaking hands. They doubted it at first, but recognizing Julian's handwriting, their entire world instantly shattered into a million pieces. Cornered by a mountain of undeniable proof, Julian finally lost the courage to keep lying. He dropped to his knees, begging desperately, crying that he was sorry and shouldn't have lied to them. Claiming he was just insecure and terrified they would abandon him, he explained why he framed his cousin. Begging for one last chance to be their good son, blood dripped down his face, but my parents just stared with cold, dead eyes. The contents of that diary were a horrific shock, exposing a sickeningly cruel reality to everyone. Our parents had literally destroyed their own flesh and blood to spoil a nephew who was a venomous, scheming snake. My parents looked at each other, a massive wave of pure, crushing regret swallowing them completely. Was it too late to fix things? Realizing his dramatic self-harm wouldn't win them over, Julian finally dropped the pathetic act. His face twisted into a hideous shape as he snapped, "Was I really wrong? It is every man for himself. I wanted a better life, and I would do the exact same thing all over again." My dad let out a wild, primal roar and straight up kicked Julian flying across the room. He charged forward, unleashing a brutal storm of punches and kicks until Julian was sobbing for mercy. My mother joined in, hitting him even harder. The more they had adored Julian before, the more intensely they absolutely despised him now. Honestly, who can blame her cold sneer? What is the point of waking up now? Julian lay half dead on the floor like a discarded toy, lacking the strength to even weep. Gasping for air, my parents turned to look at Serafina, their faces flushed with overwhelming, deep shame. They begged her to find Caspian, admitting they had horribly wronged him all these long years. Desperately wanting to make things right, Serafina stayed silent, staring out at the dark night sky. She quietly whispered, "What does finding him even matter? We lost him a long, long time ago." My parents flinched violently at her words, bowing their heads as warm tears finally spilled over. Meanwhile, deep inside the National Defense Academy's South Campus, we enter a heavily classified restricted zone. Beyond the border defense troops, this place trained elite personnel handpicked from top military districts. The campus was split clean in half. Active soldiers guarded the outer perimeter, while elite student trainees resided deep within the secure core. At high noon, the blazing sun baked the earth. Summer was barely over, yet a brutal autumn heatwave had already struck. Uniformed students drilled relentlessly under the blistering heat. Sweat completely drenched their gear, but they stood tall as pines, eyes locked ahead. As elite military cryptography majors, we did not just study algorithms. We had to build absolute, peak physical endurance. 2 weeks had already passed. Relying purely on the intense workout routines General Sterling personally taught me, I managed to push my average body through this grueling daily training. Plus, the academy food was incredibly good. Living conditions in 1983 weren't exactly great, and eating meat back home was a total luxury. Especially since my biased parents gave every single good scrap to Julian, leaving me to gnaw on cabbage leaves and sleep on a damp balcony. But here, with decent meals, I actually started hitting a pretty major growth spurt. I looked quite energetic, my eyes sharp and bright. A complete 180 from the heartbroken boy who looked like he might collapse at any second. I carried a whole new aura now. Meeting the Defense Academy recruiter first time, I was totally awestruck, but now I saw how the military truly molds people. Surrounded by soldiers with absolute ironclad discipline, who actually had the time or energy to cry over romantic drama? Boot camp lasted 3 months, and I gradually adapted to the intense college rhythm, physical training by day and hitting the library by night. Since my major was cryptography, the future scenarios I would face would be extremely hostile, meaning I could never reveal my true identity. I would basically be a completely invisible man, as every student here was considered a priceless national asset. I cherished this hard-earned learning environment way more than anything. Out here, there were no biased parents and no cheating fiancé. There was only studying hard and serving the motherland. I was absolutely thirsty for knowledge, devouring books and unwilling to leave the library even late at night, just like many peers who were top-tier scholars from all over the country. Back in my home county, I was ranked number 1, but here, I really felt the immense pressure. Every single person around me was a certified genius with a burning desire to serve the country. Just picture this, a total ocean of books, leaving me completely awestruck as I finally stepped outside late that night. Living in the library wouldn't be enough to finish them in a lifetime, so I focused on previewing the foundational cryptography knowledge before our classes officially started. That night air was pretty cool as water, Walking down the path, I paused to look up at the sky, a fleeting memory of my old home flashing through my mind, knowing I might literally never return. The four of them were probably living their absolute best lives. When I first arrived, even though I was entirely done with them, they still occasionally crossed my mind. Being far away makes anyone a bit nostalgic, but as time went on, the voices of my parents and Serafina completely faded. Aside from a random stray thought, my heart was a flatline. My feelings for Serafina had cooled to absolute zero, but I wasn't entirely friendless at college. Besides my 5 roommates, I also met Alara from the capital, a totally unique girl whose personality was the polar opposite of Serafina's. She was warm, pretty open, and sometimes felt like a heavily protected greenhouse flower, yet her personal capabilities were absolutely insane. Her understanding of cryptography was easily the very best I had ever seen. From day one, Alara was the undeniable campus belle, and although the NDA didn't explicitly ban dating, she naturally attracted a huge swarm of boys. Some said she came from an elite family, just there to pad her resume before transferring out, but I didn't care either way. I was a lone wolf by habit, but to everyone's absolute shock, Alara took the initiative to approach me with pretty obvious interest. Their jaws hit the floor, and honestly, I was just speechless. Approaching the dormitory entrance, I spotted a pretty slender silhouette standing ahead, looking right at me with a beaming smile. Alara was very proactive, not necessarily romantically, but mostly just seeking intense academic discussions. However, waiting outside the boys' dorm in the middle of the night was practically scandalous in this era, and guys returning couldn't help but stare, their eyes full of innocent, teasing smirks. I honestly just wanted to pull a quick U-turn and run, but seeing Alara standing there with a clear posture that she wouldn't leave until we talked, I had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk over. Alara handed me a notebook, her smile blooming like a flower as she told me she had organized these study notes for me. I stared at the red notebook, hesitating to take it, even though I did love studying and knew Alara was a total prodigy. Even before classes started, she knew cryptography inside and out. We had actually met right in the library. While other freshmen ran around campus high on excitement, I preferred complete isolation, reading peacefully in a quiet corner. The reason I got into Edenbridge wasn't just because I was smart, but because I had an incredibly phenomenal mentor back home. I never told my family about him, not even Serafina, because of his highly problematic political background. He had spent years locked in a cowshed, earning the nickname Professor Thorne, the Cowshed Scholar. Professor Thorne was basically a walking encyclopedia, mastering astronomy, geography, you name it. But in that harsh era, knowledge was a sin, branding him an enemy of the state. When he fell critically ill with absolutely no one to help him, an 11-year-old me, who had just been kicked out of the house, thanks to Julian's framing, stumbled into his ruined temple. The old man and the kid instantly bonded. Following his weak instructions, I risked my life climbing the back mountain to gather herbs, nearly falling to my death several times. That single moment saved Professor Thorne. After that, I couldn't stay away. He eventually made me his final disciple, showing me how knowledge could rewrite my entire future. He possessed a depth of wisdom that put my high school teachers to shame. He guided me into a fiercely independent, hungry kid. Even with my family treating me like garbage, I stayed kind and deeply patriotic. Thorne was the only anchor keeping me from spiraling. He lived a brutal, painful life, yet he proved that no amount of suffering could crush his spirit. But right after my college entrance exams, tragedy struck. He passed away on a cold, rainy night. I rushed over, desperate to tell him I got into Edenbridge, but when I stepped inside the ruined temple, I only found his lifeless body. Heartbroken, I buried him all by myself up on the mountain, leaving with only a jade pendant he once gave me. My mentor, my only true guide, was gone. Grieving and completely alone in the world, the only shoulder I had left to lean on was Serafina. But what did she do that very same day? She demanded I throw away my college future just to sign a marriage certificate. My entire sky collapsed. Was I really about to lose everything else, too? Falling into that dark pit is what finally woke me up. I turned down Edenbridge, joined the National Defense Academy, and chose to serve my country. I showed up at school with just a single woven bag and a few worn-out clothes. Oh, and that jade pendant from Professor Thorne. Whenever the loneliness got too heavy in the library, I'd hold it. And right here is where our female-led steps in her eyes locked right onto that pendant. Trust me, she wasn't just beautiful. This girl came from a serious military family. Rumor was, she arrived in a jeep and got personally greeted by the highest generals. And ever since she spotted that green jade, she'd been sticking to me like glue. She wasn't shy like other girls from this era. She was incredibly bold, tossing the rules aside to wait outside a boy's dorm, ignoring all the whispers. Staring at her offering, I sighed. It was time to draw a line. I took her notebook, looked right into those bright eyes, and made my expression dead serious. Alara, please don't come looking for me anymore. Hearing that, she completely froze, her eyes immediately turning red. It looked like she had 1,000 things to say, but she just lowered her head and whispered a tiny, quiet okay. She didn't press further, but the silence felt incredibly heavy. Fighting off a sudden wave of pity, I watched her walk off. Honestly, my only goal was studying and serving my country. Love wasn't even on my radar. And after that, she actually stopped coming. Once basic training finished, we got a day off, and most freshmen immediately bolted straight to the city. Since tuition was free, students even got a 10 yuan monthly allowance, which felt like a massive fortune back in 1983. I didn't care about spending money, so I stayed behind in the library studying cryptography. Suddenly, Alara sat right across from me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a green jade pendant. It was the matching half to mine. I had the dragon, she had the phoenix. A matched pair. Then she dropped a massive bomb. I am your fiancé. I almost fell clean out of my chair. The entire room went dead silent. Coming from a modern era, I absolutely hated arranged marriages, especially after the nightmare Serafina put me through. Love? My mind was hyper-rational now. I wasn't looking for some fantasy love story. But man, Alara was daring. Back then, making a wild claim like that could get you arrested. Shaking my head, I took a deep breath to calm down and gave her a stern look. Alara, watch your behavior. We are here at the academy to study and serve our country, not to mess around with romance. We've never met before today, so there is no engagement. I was basically giving her a direct, flashing warning sign to stop. Keep talking like that, and the disciplinary officer is going to drag us both in. She seemed to realize her words were pretty scandalous, but after thinking it over for days, she chose to lay out the whole truth. Pointing at the pendant, she explained. These matching pendants actually belonged to her father and his closest, oldest friend. Back then, they swore if they had a boy and a girl, they'd marry them off. If the kids were the same gender, they'd be brothers. Decades went by and her dad kept that promise, but his friend ended up sentenced to hard labor during the political chaos and totally vanished. Believing the dragon pendant was gone for good, and with zero interest in arranged marriage, Alara simply joined the academy. How wild is that? Out of all the places, she actually spotted my dragon pendant in the middle of the library. As I listened, the puzzle pieces started fitting together. With Professor Thorne's incredible wisdom, he definitely wasn't some simple local villager. He clearly had a highly prestigious background before becoming a tragic victim of that chaotic era. I still don't know why he chose to live like a hermit in a ruined temple after getting cleared. No wonder he had that incredibly strange look when he handed me the pendant. It finally clicked. This thing was actually a betrothal token. A gorgeous fiancé with a powerful family to elevate your status. Honestly, most guys would call this a miracle straight from heaven. But after barely surviving Serafina's betrayal, I was completely done with love. Any connection between students at the NDA had to be strictly professional. After just a brief hesitation, I unclasped the dragon pendant and slid it over to Alara. I explained that I am not Professor Thorne's biological kid and wouldn't have taken it if I knew. I told her it should return to its real owner and we should just pretend this marriage talk never happened. Before Alara could even say a word, I just stood up and walked away. Alara sat there staring at the two matching pendants forming a perfect circle, feeling completely and utterly wronged. She could not explain it, but from day one, she felt I was different. My lone wolf vibe, that deep conviction, mixed with a faint trace of deep sorrow. It was a look she had never seen on any peer. It felt like staring into a bottomless abyss. Too close, and you would fall in. Holding the pendants, she walked to the window. The night sky above the library was stunning, while the massive parasol tree by the track completely ignored the cold autumn wind. Its leaves were still stubbornly green and alive. Back in my dorm, I sat on the quiet balcony and stared into the dark sky. I decided to keep my head down, focus on classes, and stay far away from Alara. Boot camp ended, and real classes finally started. In this era of rebuilding the nation, every single student had a ravenous hunger for knowledge. They carried burning convictions and pure hearts. Meanwhile, alongside my studies, I kept pushing my hard physical training. Running into Alara in the cafeteria, we just nodded politely and kept walking past. Earlier, gossip was flying that we were hooking up, almost bringing the discipline officers down on us. But as we drifted apart, the rumors finally died. Most of the guys breathed a massive sigh of relief, agreeing a goddess like Alara shouldn't belong to any single person. One day, while jogging on the track, I suddenly freeze. My eyes lock straight ahead, and my face instantly turns dark. Oh man, look who it is, Serafina. The second I appear, she is completely transfixed. Her feet start moving toward me almost on instinct, but just one tiny cold look from me turns her face ghost white. The boy who used to completely depend on her, who used to light up with joy seeing her, literally takes a few steps back. It was the exact defensive shield you raise against a deadly enemy. Serafina felt like her heart had been blown wide open. The pain was suffocating. Was I really that completely disgusted by her now? Choking back the sheer agony in her chest, she tries to step closer, only for me to step back again. She looks totally crushed. When she whispers my name, I coldly cut her off, calling her sister and telling her to watch her conduct. Shock explodes in her eyes. Why did those exact words sound so agonizingly familiar? She suddenly remembers the day I got my admission and ran to her, glowing with pure excitement to share it. And what did she do? She instinctively stepped back to keep her distance, coldly warning me that it was a public courtyard and to watch my conduct. The crushing weight of that memory finally hit her. She finally understood exactly how devastated I must have felt back then. Agony burns deep in her eyes. Taking a slow, deep breath to steady her voice, she asks why I suddenly left without saying a single word. She asks if I really want to cut all ties. Hearing this, my face remains completely stone cold and indifferent. I do not argue, but my absolute freezing apathy stabs straight through Serafina's chest. She finally understands what my silence really meant. Growing up in a cold, loveless house, forced to always give up the best things. If you yield once, you surrender forever. I was completely broken inside. My only escape was to wipe away my past, live hiding my identity, and cut contact forever. Just how much raw despair does it take to make a choice like that? Just thinking about it makes Serafina's chest physically ache. Yet, knowing I survived such a brutal existence for over 10 years, how did she have the nerve to question me now? If I had not left in silence, they absolutely would have driven me to my grave. Serafina reaches out, wanting to pat my head like old times, but her hand just hovers in midair. Looking into my dead, empty eyes, her mind takes another absolutely devastating hit. A simple sorry. Thousands of unspoken words crushed down into one tiny pathetic apology. She has absolutely nothing left to say. Look closely at this moment as I stare up, my eyes drift over to that old parasol tree. My mind flashes back to age 11, kicked out of my own home and crying under that tree. Back then, she was my saving angel. But it was precisely because of that false hope that I got dragged straight into the abyss. Even now, my heart feels a sharp phantom pain. I snap my gaze back, eyes turning hard as steel. If you came to help Julian beg for his Edenbridge spot back, forget it. The ship has sailed, and I will never look back. Serafina's face instantly loses all color as she frantically shakes her head. She stammers out my name, pleading that she only wanted to see me, desperately trying to paint our toxic past as some massive misunderstanding. She never actually hated me, nor did she want to push me away. But recalling the terrible things she did, she simply can't find the courage to say it. I tell her flatly that since she has seen me, she can leave. I want absolutely nothing to do with her. Just looking at her tears open the painful scars from 6 months ago. Scars I spent half a year of absolute hell trying to heal. Why did she have to show up and ruin my peace? Serafina trembles, finally realizing she is about to lose me forever. She desperately grabs my wrist, her eyes swimming with painful tears as she asks how on earth we ended up like this. Her voice cracks, her entire face twisting in pure agony. I just stare back, asking her the exact same question with icy calm. Back when she kept breaking my heart just to please Julian, I screamed that exact question in my head a million times. But now? It doesn't matter now. This is the absolute last time I will ever refer to her as my sister. I genuinely hope she and Julian have a wonderful life together, but she needs to stop looking for me. Serafina opens her mouth to keep begging, but my next words hit her like a lightning strike, freezing her right in her tracks. I tell her I am quite grateful for her past kindness, so she shouldn't force me to hate her now. Serafina stands frozen, completely pale. She watches in silence as my shadow disappears, before collapsing onto the cold pavement, utterly consumed by a wave of bitter regret and grief. This fierce woman, someone who wouldn't even blink at a bullet, is now sobbing uncontrollably with hot tears streaming down her face. She can't connect the memory of the sweet, adoring boy who loved her with the icy, distant stranger standing right in front of her. The reality that she has lost me forever hits hard as a single leaf from the nearby tree drifts down onto her shoulder. Right then, Serafina is more certain of her deep feelings for me than she has ever been in her whole life. But this realization comes way too late. I am already gone. The summer heat around her suddenly feels like a freezing winter blizzard. Her entire body goes completely numb. Gazing where I walked away, A sharp, stabbing chest pain finally registers, tearing her whole world to shreds. With my silent departure, her life turns into an empty void. Check this out, the crushing grief of losing her true love finally snaps her back to reality. She immediately sees through Julian's terrible lies, uncovering proof of his sabotage. But she can't stop wondering why she ignored my suffering for so long. For 6 whole months, she searched for me like a crazy person, throwing her entire military career on the line. But she simply couldn't crack the security of a brilliant cryptography major. Eventually, General Sterling couldn't stand seeing his daughter waste away like a total zombie, so he pulled major favors at the academy. Once she got my location, she rushed over. She honestly believed that a quick conversation to clear up the past would fix everything and make things normal again. But the moment she met my cold, dead eyes, she saw how incredibly foolish she had been. The sweet kid who shared his entire world with her is completely gone, replaced by someone she doesn't even recognize. She desperately wanted to plead her case, but the words choked in her throat. She could only watch my retreating back. Just like the falling leaves of autumn, everything comes down eventually. She remains standing under that tree for hours, completely lost. Glancing at the dry leaves under my feet, I recall the day she held my hand and promised we would stay together forever. Sadly, she shattered that promise, causing wounds that cut far deeper than anything Julian ever did to me. Right now, Serafina is completely drowning in grief. She is finally tasting the exact same brutal misery she forced me to survive. Instead of going back to my room, I wander aimlessly around school just to make sure I don't cross paths with her. My quiet new life has been completely shattered. Feeling thoroughly annoyed and exhausted, I somehow wander over to the library steps. Staring blankly at the locked entrance, I sit down in the chill of the moonlight, shivering just a little bit. When I was 11, she was my beacon of hope. I spent 7 long years loving her, only for her to completely destroy my world when I turned 18. And now she shows up here, pretending it was all just a simple misunderstanding? Every single betrayal flashes through my head like an old movie. I didn't even know if I could believe her, but seeing her face made the harsh truth perfectly clear. I honestly thought I had shut off all my feelings, but the pain is still raw. I haven't really let it go. But get this, right in the middle of my breakdown, a shadow falls over me. I look up and see Alara standing there. She quietly sits down right beside me, gazing up at the stars before telling me to just let it all out. A massive weight of unspoken words is crushing my chest, with nobody to talk to. The sheer amount of pain I have bottled up inside for years is enough to break anyone. Alara was basically a stranger, but somehow her presence gave me this crazy sense of security. Under the pale moonlight, I let it all out. The unfair parents, the cheating fiancé, and how broken I felt. My voice stayed quiet, like I was telling someone else's sad history. She just rested her chin and listened. One talked, one listened as time froze, then she suddenly asked if I still loved her. She turned her head, curiosity flickering in her pretty eyes. Her calm voice could not hide that tiny hint of nervousness. I expected that question to twist my brain into knots, but somehow the answer came to me instantly. No, I really do not love her anymore. When you hit peak disappointment, you get pretty immune to family and romance. She clearly did not expect such a fast answer. She blanked out for a moment, then this huge smile lit up her face, sending a wave of warm comfort my way. I really liked being around this side of Alara. She stood up, patted my shoulder, and told me to just tell her that. You have to slash away the past to find a future, she said. Now go sleep. Tomorrow is going to be better. With my mind finally clear, I went back to the dorm and slept like a total rock. When I woke up, the warm morning sun hit my face, and I felt lighter than air. I went to class normally, but kept running into Serafina. In the hallways, the cafeteria, even during late-night study sessions. She was somehow always there. She would stand quietly by the path, watching me with deep, tender affection. Wearing her striking military uniform, her beautiful, sad face made her a total visual attraction on the campus grounds. Soon, people started putting the pieces together. Back in the winter of 1983, society was still pretty conservative. See, drama like this was a huge deal back then. Rumors spread fast. On the 6th night of her staying, the brutal Hunan heatwave finally broke into a freezing rainstorm. I was reading when my roommate mentioned a woman standing downstairs in the downpour. I knew exactly who it was. I sat there in silence for quite a while, then finally stood up and headed down. It was time to end this once and for all. Stepping outside, I spotted her blurry shape standing in the freezing rain. Taking a deep breath, I slowly walked over. That first autumn rain had a seriously biting chill to it. She was totally soaked to the bone, staring at me with those helpless, loving eyes as I got closer and closer. I looked closely at the girl standing before me, but my heart felt completely quiet. Years ago, if Serafina even frowned, I would have torn down the moon just to see her smile again. But now? She looked completely heartbroken, yet I felt absolutely nothing. Honestly, it was just getting a little annoying. Too late love is worth less than dirt. The feelings I carried for years, the girl I wanted to protect forever, had lost all meaning because of her constant favoritism. Once I cut off my emotions and went into cryptography, dedicating my entire life to the nation, she suddenly shows up claiming a misunderstanding. Maybe our whole relationship was the actual mistake. I held the umbrella over her head, gently reaching out to wipe the cold rainwater from her wet face. That single touch made her eyes spark with sudden, desperate hope. But I just shook my head, smiling with total freedom, and told her it was not worth it. Looking past her at the trees blurred by the storm, I thanked her for everything she did for me in the past. She helped me survive my absolute coldest winters, back when I was in deeper despair than even Professor Thorne in his old cowshed. But she was also the one who slowly destroyed my hope, piece by piece. I warned her not to try and sugarcoat her actions. Scars are permanent, and do not just disappear. I told her to look at herself, because she was no longer the sister I once loved. Serafina's face completely twisted up. Her cold purple lips started trembling as she choked back a gasp, shaking her head in total denial. She wanted to scream out that she was still my sister, but looking into my cold, flat stare, her voice completely failed her. I gently wiped more rainwater from her face. You can just feel the exact, painful moment she realizes he is gone forever. She desperately tried to grab onto me, but my heavy words were like rusty nails driven deep into her heart, bleeding her dry as her world fell apart. She apologized to me, crying that she only managed to get a week of leave, only 1 week to see me. Knowing I wanted space, she had only watched from afar. Since she had to leave tomorrow, she begged for one last chance. She wiped her face, begging for mercy. I stayed silent, staring at her crying face while feeling absolutely nothing inside. Right then, an unspoken truth settled between us. Serafina swayed slightly on her feet, shutting her eyes in pure agony. Watching her cry used to tear me apart. Now, I felt zero sympathy. It was official, I did not love her anymore. I handed her the umbrella and started walking back to the dorm. This was the end. I truly hoped our paths would never cross again. Serafina, Julian, and my toxic parents. The four of them could go live happily ever after. I was always treated like a useless spare part, but now I would dedicate my life to the country. No regrets. With my romantic ties severed, I was finally living for myself. Suddenly, Serafina dropped the umbrella, lunged forward, and grabbed me from behind. She begged through her tears, pleading with me not to leave because she was wrong. Her tears kept falling, but I did not struggle. I just closed my eyes as she held me tightly until the heavy rain finally stopped. The bright moon broke through the clouds, casting a cold, quiet light over the trees. As the sky cleared, her shadow holding onto me looked like it was frozen in time forever. Slowly, she let go, her soul tearing apart. I took a step forward without looking back as her heart shattered. Falling to her knees, she wept in absolute agony, finally realizing she had lost me forever. You can practically feel the karma hitting her here as she finally tastes the exact, bone-deep despair she put me through. She understood her mistake, but regret came too late. Her leave ended, and she left the academy. When the day came for her to depart, she did not even say goodbye. She knew I would refuse to see her. She knew my heart was dead, and how spectacularly she had screwed everything up. Before coming here, she actually brought a marriage application, hoping I would just sign it. But reality hit her like a freight train. My attitude made it clear that even a marriage certificate was impossible. Even sitting across from each other like normal people was out of the question. Her heart was shattered, yet she had no excuses. She was the one who personally drove me away, constantly rubbing salt in my deep wounds night after night. Now, she felt that exact suffocating pain. They say true love means letting go, but Serafina refused to give up on me. Determined to find a way to atone, she wanted to make amends. She wanted to prove she was still that sweet girl next door, who once promised I would never be alone. When she finally left, the sky was gloomy. Sitting on the train, watching the city shrink in the distance, she slowly closed her eyes. Opening them again, a cold, lethal glint flashed in her eyes. Everyone who had bullied me would pay, including herself. I did not know what Serafina was planning, nor did I care. With everything settled, I focused on being a normal student. My days were just studying and working out. For 6 months, I stayed a lone wolf. Eventually, Alara became a constant presence next to me. That moonlit night had made me realize something important. You cannot live for what others think, and you cannot let emotions chain you down. I used to be blind, desperately craving my parents' love and Serafina's approval, driving myself into massive emotional burnout. So, I stopped missing my cold-blooded family. They were not worth it, and I ignored the gossip about me hanging out with Alara. Obviously, there was zero romance between us. Our connection was purely academic. Alara clearly came from an elite background, knowing a lot and easily obtaining the most advanced research materials. When she offered to teach me how computer programming applies to cryptography, I knew I had to seize this incredible opportunity. From then on, Alara stayed by my side, using her family's massive resources to get me advanced cryptography data while I helped her in return. To outsiders, we looked like a real couple, and eventually, the student gossip stopped. Back then, college campuses were pretty open-minded about dating, and young people welcomed new ideas. The campus officer held one meeting to tell everyone to keep it decent, and then stopped interfering entirely. So, Alara and I hanging out was officially labeled a revolutionary partnership. It made sense. But watch this, a photo of us studying together in the library somehow reached that distant military compound. In a dark room, Serafina sat on the sofa with her head low, surrounded by empty bottles in a room reeking of alcohol. This was only the second time she had gotten drunk since enlistment. The first? The night I confessed my love. Back then, she drank and hesitated until dawn, but seeing me with Alara now made her heart ache with unbearable pain. Next door, furious shouting echoed. The parents were currently punishing Julian for his actions. His filthy, underhanded tricks were finally fully exposed, completely ruining his reputation. Forget about a factory job, nobody would even hire Julian for basic day labor. Lacking any real survival skills, he could only leech off his family. Unfortunately for him, they were totally done spoiling him. Whatever lies he used to frame me, he was now paying for them 1,000 times over. Broken by the brutal torture, Julian fell to his knees before Serafina, begging her to save him. But Serafina was way more sadistic than his parents ever were. From then on, Julian lived a nightmare worse than death. Everyone was trying to avenge me in their own way, desperately begging for my forgiveness. Did I care? Not at all. Honestly, watching his parents visibly wither away from guilt is pure satisfaction. Regret and grief were carved right into their faces as they lived in constant agony. Every night, after punishing Julian, they just hid and wept. They missed their son. They cried, they knelt, they begged. But Serafina flat out refused to say where I was. This was their ultimate karma. Time marched on. Before we knew it, 3 whole years had flown by. Julian was left half dead, with dark circles permanently burned under his eyes, completely losing his grip on reality. He actually fell into a state of deep depression. Finally, graduation arrived at the academy. One day, a sudden phone call came, and Serafina instantly left the compound. Now, it was her turn to face the music. All squads are in position. This operation is extremely critical. Absolutely no room for mistakes. In the summer of 1987, hordes of new graduates volunteered to develop the Great Northwest, bringing massive security risks with them. Back then, earning a college degree was a massive honor, making every single graduate a priceless national treasure. Our academy cryptography graduates joined this movement, but we definitely took a different and secret road. We had to set up a hidden research base out there, secretly working on high-tech computer decryption. This classified assignment was crucial for the future of modern warfare, so our entire class got shipped straight to the wilderness. Of course, enemy forces saw us as a massive threat and tried every trick in the book to destroy us. The military sent a specialized special ops brigade to protect us, and Serafina was chosen to command our escort. She stayed completely hidden from hostile enemy eyes. Fully geared up for battle, she stood on a ridge watching our convoy roll by below, her sharp eyes scanning everything, but they softened completely the moment she saw the lead truck. Over those 3 years, Serafina earned enough honors to get promoted several times. But she turned down every single one. She was waiting for this exact chance, and when our cryptography unit got sent out, she jumped at the escort mission. Ever since leaving that secure base behind, she felt like her life had lost all real purpose. She desperately wanted to be my protective big sister again, proving with real actions that she was still the same. Her path to redemption was quietly acting as my secret guardian angel. Besides, once we arrived, she might actually get a chance to see me. It was truly the only move she had left. Sitting inside the truck, I stared out at the infinite desert wasteland. The deeper we traveled into the wild, the more unforgiving the weather became. This was my first real taste of life outside my school bubble. I quickly realized our grueling academy training was a walk in the park compared to this. 4 long years had completely transformed me. I had grown incredibly tough and reliable, graduating at the absolute top of my class as our brightest star. Traveling out northwest, I carried a massive responsibility on my shoulders. Along the way, our truck stopped a few times but kept moving. Believe it or not, we were targeted constantly, but our hidden guardians quietly crushed every single ambush. By the time we reached the research base, our 200-man security team was cut in half. That is how savage the hidden battles were. Nobody took a break when we arrived. We went straight to work. Checking out the lab, I realized our communications gear was incredibly outdated, so I immediately wrote up a plan for a full upgrade. Back at school, I had already published some massive papers that completely revolutionized our country's approach to information security. The commanders put me in charge of my own team, both to test my limits and to help push our defenses to a whole new level. I did not let them down. Within 3 months, I totally modernized the base, upgrading our cryptographic defenses by a massive margin. I earned a prestigious first-class merit only 3 months into my professional career. During long shifts, I constantly felt a pair of eyes watching my back, but whenever I spun around, there was only empty space. I blamed it on sleep deprivation and hallucinations. Then, a ferocious desert sandstorm completely wiped out our main relay station right when I was running a critical experiment. Desperate, I charged right out into the raging storm to fix it, braving the torrential rain and massive danger. I barely survived fixing the communication station, only to plunge straight into a hidden sinkhole on my way back. Now, I was completely trapped in a dark cave. A deafening storm outside completely cut off my radio signal. I was stranded down there, starving, for 3 whole days. Right as my vision began to fade and death felt close, a bright beam of light cut through the dark. A familiar figure stepped forward, lifted me up, and began to climb. They were not big, but their strength was explosive. Reaching the surface, that first breath of clean air felt absolutely heavenly. There is nothing like the rush of barely escaping death. I wanted to thank them so badly, but they just dumped my body with the medics and vanished. I tried calling out, but my body gave up and I passed out. 3 days later, I woke up in the infirmary. Once I could actually stand, I asked around about my savior, but everyone completely shut down. Even the research and development director dropped by, telling me to focus only on my work. He said protecting researchers is their duty, so I should not overthink things. I just nodded and let it go. Still, I caught rumors about a mysterious special operations unit secretly guarding our team ever since we left the academy. Just like that, 3 years fly by. I finished building the 2nd-generation communication system, giving our military a massive upgrade. Because of that, they promoted me to Deputy Director of the Research and Development Center. But on my very last day in the Gobi Desert, the director invited me for a private drink and dropped a heavy truth bomb on me. Since our communication tech was so critical, enemies had been targeting our center constantly. In fact, rogue enemy forces launched at least 70 separate attacks over the last 3 years. We stopped every single one, but the price was devastating. We crushed their plots and finished our mission, but at what cost? Now, you are moving to a bigger stage to tackle even tougher assignments. The director pulled a worn photo from his pocket and slid it across the table, his voice turning rough with emotion. He confessed he kept it secret to protect my focus, but since I was leaving, he could not hide the truth anymore. Over 200 special forces, soldiers died protecting us. My hands started shaking, my eyes burning with tears. Silently, I raised my glass to honor their ultimate sacrifice. The director sighed heavily, asking if I was familiar with Commander G. I froze. Who was Commander G? I had never heard that name. Yet, completely out of nowhere, an image of Serafina G. Yunju flashed in my mind. Shaking my head, I mocked myself. Serafina was probably still living at some military base, married to Julian by now. Their kid was probably running around by now. There was no way she would be out here in the Gobi Desert fighting enemies. But his next words hit me like lightning. Get ready, because Commander G is actually Serafina. She had been guarding me in secret for 3 entire years. When I fell into that deep cave, she threw her own life on the line to drag me out, destroying her leg in the process. Dozens of brutal assassination attempts targeting me were stopped by her. Now that our 2nd-generation system was finally complete, her special unit had finished their assignment and was packing up to leave. Fighting on the absolute front lines against dangerous enemy forces for years, Serafina had been shot 3 separate times. One of those bullets almost pierced her heart. She nearly died, yet she flat out refused to ever leave the battlefield. Today, she was finally pulling out. The director had guessed there was something deep between us. That is why he secretly tipped me off, even though she strictly ordered him never to tell me. My eyes locked onto the photograph on the table. It was that old picture of Alara and me studying side by side in our school library. Even though the half showing Alara had been ripped away, I knew exactly what it was. Was she really guarding me all those 3 years? Why never show herself? Think about how devastating that realization feels. Learning that she took bullets for me, saved my life repeatedly, and did not even want to see my face. She just stayed in the dark, watching over me. Suddenly, I remembered crying under that big tree when I was only 11. Back then, Serafina appeared like an angel, holding my hand and promising she would always protect me. I truly believed our time at the academy was the end of our story. I thought we were completely finished, but this truth absolutely shattered my soul. I was not that clueless kid anymore, but hearing her sacrifice brought this suffocating, heavy grief over me. Taking a deep breath, I snatched the picture and dashed out into the open. Running out of the Research and Development Center, I spotted a military jeep speeding away. I screamed her name as loud as I possibly could. Serafina! No one answered, but I knew down to my bones that she was inside that vehicle. Why would she not answer me? Inside the moving jeep, Serafina watched me chasing after her through the dusty rearview mirror. Her cold expression briefly fractured, but she quickly forced her emotions down. The driver hesitated, asking if they should turn back. Serafina looked down at her empty left sleeve, closed her eyes, and told the driver to go. Her left arm was blown off during a brutal, desperate clash with the enemy just to protect me. Now, she was disabled. The higher-ups forced her to step back for medical treatment. She wanted to protect me, but knew she would only be a burden now. So, she finally agreed to leave. She had quietly guarded me in her own way, but our road was still long, and she could no longer walk it with me. Her heart was bleeding. For 3 years, she had watched my back while I worked day and night in the lab. A million times, she wanted to walk up and stand right next to me. But remembering the sheer trauma she once caused me, her feet stayed glued to the floor. If you love someone, you choose not to get in their way. Besides, looking like this, how could she ever be worthy of me? She felt I deserved someone much better. So, Serafina left. She never told me when she arrived, and she never said goodbye. 10 years fly by, and check this out, our country's entire national infosecurity underwent massive, earth-shattering changes. Fourth-generation tech made massive leaps, all thanks to years of non-stop effort. We had not quite hit peak global standards yet, but we were growing at breakneck speed. As a 1987 National Defense Academy graduate, hardened by over 10 years of brutal grinding, I went from a green rookie to a top-tier tech expert. Pouring every waking second into military network security, I became the youngest leader in the field. Today, I was the chief expert. Living out in the barren deserts all year, I survived on a Spartan routine, rejecting luxury perks to serve my country. Seeing me work myself to the bone, the higher-ups stepped in and ordered me to take a vacation. They practically kicked me out of the base and sent me to the city. Because of my security clearance, I was supposed to have bodyguards and an escort. I absolutely hated that VIP circus, so, taking only my personal assistant, I checked out with the brass and slipped away quietly. My very first stop was returning to the National Defense Academy for the Class of '98's graduation ceremony. Standing on that stage during my speech, I looked down at a sea of fresh young students, staring up at me with absolute awe. At barely 40 years old, sitting right next to the school president as a legendary graduate in cryptography, I was basically their rock star. Staring into those eyes full of admiration, I suddenly remembered the exact way I used to look at Serafina. It had been over 10 years now. My feelings for Serafina were nothing but a distant memory. My last memory of her was that military vehicle driving away into the Gobi Desert. For 10 years, I had heard absolutely nothing. I even tried calling her old unit to thank her, but they told me she had already retired and left. Sitting there, looking at these kids who were the future of our nation's defense just like I used to be, my mind drifted back home. I wanted to see Serafina. I had no idea why, but being forced on vacation made me feel compelled to act, not for romance, of course. At my age, I had already dedicated my entire life to my duty and our people. The second I left the academy, I headed straight for my hometown without telling a single soul. I went straight to the old military compound, standing right under that familiar parasol tree. More than a decade has passed, and look at this, the old tree looks exactly the same, but the dirt is paved over with asphalt now. Those same red bricks and green tiles remained. Standing out front, I quietly stared at the house where I used to grow up. I did not care to miss my unfair parents. They always had Julian. Even if I died tomorrow, they would not shed a single tear. Coming back here, other than seeing General Sterling, my real goal was to thank Serafina face to face. But after asking around, I learned that General Sterling had already been transferred out of the city entirely. No one seemed to know the details of Serafina's retirement either. They only guessed she moved north with her father. Even my parents, the two people I wanted to see, least of all, had moved away for some unknown reason. I felt a huge wave of relief, mixed with a little bit of disappointment. Since my time was short and I wanted to get back, I did not stay long. Returning to the old parasol tree, I stood there in silence. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was my wife, Alora. She reminded me I was on vacation and needed to come home, saying our son missed his dad. Hearing my little boy's voice, a rare, warm smile broke across my usually serious face. I hung up, got in the car, and drove off. A cold breeze swept by, blowing a single leaf from the tree. Autumn had finally arrived without me even noticing. From a window in her old house, a quiet silhouette watched me drive away. Serafina had never moved north with her father. Instead, she stayed right there in the compound, waiting. She had no idea what for, but she just kept waiting. But when I finally came back, she just couldn't bring herself to face me, choosing instead to hide in the dark, silently watching over me like she did back in the Gobi Desert. Guilt was way too heavy back then. Now? Just pure, absolute fear. All she had left was to pray for me. And once she knew my curse was broken, she quietly slipped away, thanking the neighbors for their silence. If those neighbors hadn't covered for her, I would have found out right then. Clutching her basket, she headed straight toward the cemetery. The Vance parents lay buried here, and right next to them was another cold, solitary grave. 5 years back, pushed past his limit by endless suffering, Julian grabbed a blade and brutally slaughtered the Vance parents. The very parents who loved him more than life itself. His severe depression had spiraled into total, psychotic madness. After the slaughter, he slit his wrists in the tub. By the time anyone found them, 3 decaying bodies were rotting inside that quiet home. Get this. Serafina used her connections to keep the news buried, desperate to shield me from the heartbreak. Staring at the tombstones, Serafina sighed and looked up at the gray sky, whispering that Caspian had finally returned. She told them he was doing incredibly well now, so they could rest easy. Only the living had to suffer. We committed horrific sins and must pay the price. Maybe this is divine punishment. I just want Caspian to find true happiness. Surely they would agree with her now. She turned and walked away, her fading silhouette casting a long, desperately lonely shadow under the sunset. She remembered 17-year-old me, pouring my heart out. Cheeks flushed bright red, eyes shining with a hope as blinding as the sun. If she had only accepted my love back then, maybe our lives would be completely different. No second chances. She was doomed to drown in a suffocating ocean of regret until her very last breath. Back at the capital military district, I finally stepped inside to see my wife on the sofa, softly humming a lullaby to our sleeping baby boy. She looked absolutely radiant as a mother. Alora and I had not actually tied the knot until our late 30s. I never dared to dream she would wait for me all those years. I quietly approached, staring at the little child nestled in her arms. Those chubby, soft cheeks looked exactly like my old childhood photos. Naturally, I could not resist reaching out to gently poke his little face. Alora glared right through my soul, whispering that he just fell asleep, and if I dared to wake him, I would be on daddy duty all night. I just sheepishly pulled my hand back. Typical. I never had much of a say in this house anyway. Staring at my beautiful family, a heavy, crushing wave of guilt hit me. I had spent so many years away on duty, barely finding any time to spend with them. I wrapped my arms around Alora from behind, breathing in the scent of her hair and gently closing my eyes. This is my perfect world. Truly perfect. No matter how crazy work gets, my wife and boy are my everything. I will never let them feel the dark agony that ruined my own childhood. We are going to be just fine, marching steadily forward together, step by step, into a bright and beautiful future.